What is, what if, what wows, and what works? I had a cup of coffee and I was like, wow, this is really SF. So I took off all of those bubbles and I figured, how could I apply SF to this chart?
My name is John Brooker, and I'm your host for today. And I would really like to welcome Stephanie Hammer, who is a US born but lives in Germany now. And Stephanie has had a lot of experience with design thinking and also in solution focus, and has done what, by the sound of it, what lots of us have thought about with innovation is how do we put SF with innovation? And I'm really interested myself to find out what you're going to tell us, Stephanie.
Which of you like wine? Anybody like wine? Yeah, okay. Anybody like cheese? You know, anybody think that wine and cheese, when you put them together, taste even better? That's what I feel like too. And that's what I feel like with design thinking and SF. When I put them together, they both taste better. And today we're going to look at why. Creativity is something that needs a little practice. And so we're going to try a little warm up right now for the next couple of minutes. Does everybody have a piece of paper in front of them?
No.
Or can you get a piece of paper? Can you draw 30 circles on a piece of paper, please? Looks like most people are finished. Now I'm going to set my time timer for exactly 1 minute. And the goal here is to see how many different things you can turn a circle into. A euro coin, a stoplight, a washing machine, a ball. So I'm not going to give you any more hints, but it's about exercising creativity. Okay, so go ahead and start. Okay, so who was able to fill out all 30 circles? Wow, Chris. Wow, that's pretty impressive. I've been doing this for a long time and I haven't even been able to fill out all 30 circles. Does everybody want to show what they have? Really interesting and creative different ideas. So just like with design thinking and SF, it takes a little practice to get into the right mode. And we use this design thinking exercise to help people think out of the box and to show them that design thinking isn't something, creativity isn't something that happens like this. You actually have to work at it, dig deeper and deeper before you get really good at it. This is the first way we warm up. Okay. Today, we're going to talk about solution-focused design thinking. So how design thinking benefits from solution focus and some ideas how you might use design thinking in your own lives. So I think of design thinking and SF a little bit like a dog and a cat. We're certainly not the same animal, but we can get along really well. And my best hopes for today's session is that we become closer friends, design thinking in SF, and also on a personal level. If you ever have any questions, please reach out to me either during the session or offline, and let's see what we can do to become better friends. Why do people do design thinking? Well, the old ways of problem solving just don't work anymore. The world is really too complex. Design thinking solves problems for real people. Products people love solve real needs. And so it's good business to do design thinking for companies. It's also good business to do design thinking for us as coaches. And design thinking saves resources because by working iteratively toward an end product, you don't end up going down the wrong path. You can test all along the way and get feedback from real users and adjust your way of thinking, which is, in my mind, totally SF, right? So how do we benefit each other? When I use design thinking, I think that I'm spreading SF design thinking. I think I'm spreading the SF message around the world, and that's good for everybody, especially my customers. I think, as always, I benefit way more from using SF than I think you're going to benefit from using design thinking. So it's definitely a win for me. Design thinking gets clues from real people, and there's co-creation. Happier relationships between design thinkers and the people they're designing for, and happier relationships inside a design thinking team, and better outcomes that come out of it. And if you're listening to this talk, I hope that you get additional resources for your own coaching recipes. Maybe some of the things that I use in some aspects of design thinking might be beneficial for you in workshops or other client coaching sessions. So what does design thinking look like? A diverse team of usually 4 or 6 people work together, and they all have different talents. They're purposely selected for different talents. There's a lot of visual working going on in design thinking, a lot of Post-its on the wall, a lot of drawing, and a lot of taking stuff out of our head and on paper where the entire team can see it. And there's building creative solutions and testing them with real users to gain feedback and learn. Really a lot of hands-on experimentation with materials, which is really very fun for people. How long does a typical design thinking workshop take? Well, that really all depends. I have done them as short as 1 day, and I've done them as long as several months, where you work with a team over a longer time frame, usually on a larger project. Anything less than 1 day is just not enough to really get the whole feeling, and it's rushed. And what kind of topics are covered in design thinking? There's, of course, develop a new butter knife or develop a new car that fits user needs, but it's also stuff that's non-tangible, like how might we improve the work from home experience for working parents during COVID? Or how might we design a classroom to enable different types of learners to better learn? So what's design thinking? And there's a 6-step process or a 5-step process. You see it represented in a whole different number of ways online. But basically it's this: empathize. The foundation of a human-centric design process is empathy, building empathy for our users, really getting in their footsteps and understanding what situation are they in? What problems do they have? Kind of in SF language, we are building a platform, and then we're observing our clients in their native atmosphere. We're listening actively, we're noticing things, and we're asking questions. And then we move into a define stage. So findings from the first stage are collected to define the problem. We're making sense of everything we heard and we saw, and trying to get clarity on what we're trying to solve as a design problem. And in SF terms, we're actually staying on the surface. We're interviewing people and writing down quotes from them. And so we're not trying to overanalyze. We're really trying to look directly at their quotes and figure out what's going on. Then there comes the ideation phase. This is the stage of the design process that focuses on generating potential solutions to a problem. We're coming up with a lot of ideas for a specific user. Then we go into what's called the prototype phase, where ideas from the previous stage are turned into tangible products, something that we can test. We're building quick and dirty things to test out concepts or features. And then we go into the test phase, where users test prototypes and refine and improve ideas. So we don't explain our products to users. We just show them and we take notes and analyze. And then at the end, we reflect and iterate. So what just went on? What have we learned about it? And where could we go? If we wanted to go back in the process, where should we start again? Did we not come up with enough ideas, or did we not gather empathy or develop empathy for the right type of user? So design thinking is an iterative process. You can go anywhere back into the process and start again. And then there's this red line on the slide. And SF people probably won't like this very much. This half, empathize and define, is focusing on the problem. But if we use SF language, it's actually more like defining a platform. And then once we're through understanding the platform, we start to build a solution in the solution side. I thought it might make sense to consider what's design thinking in your context as a coach. And I came up with this theoretical challenge. Design a coaching program for city employees. So as a team, you'd define who stakeholders are. You'd unload your preconceptions about what a normal coaching program is, what city employees need together. And then you'd decide who you'd want to talk to. So who could you talk to? You could talk to their managers. You could talk to the person who's buying the program. You'd certainly talk to the city employees themselves. You might want to talk also to people who city employees interact with, like let's say they work in the water department, people who need to call the water department. What are all the people who are stakeholders in this whole process? And then you go and conduct interviews. Once you've conducted your interviews and you've taken good notes, you would unpack your interview quotes on a board, and then you'd structure them in a way that made sense for you. You could structure them according to any kind of a feedback matrix, or you could structure them according to who said what. And then you'd look at them a long time, share what's going on, and decide who exactly you're designing for. Then we'd come up with ideas. You'd brainstorm in a lot of different cycles about a coaching program that meets the real needs of city employees, really designed for them. And only after all ideas are shared and collected would you decide together on something you'd like to prototype. It could be, a prototype could be something like a course description, or an exercise you'd like to do during the coaching session. You would build something that doesn't look fancy, something that's sketched on a paper, and that you'd show somebody to get their feedback on. The nice thing about prototyping and design thinking is you're building something that you want people to interact with on a conceptual level. So if you give somebody something perfect, they're much less likely to give you honest feedback, or they're much less likely to want to hurt your feelings. So they don't give you that feedback where, no, I don't understand this, or this doesn't really make sense for me, or I love this part, right? And then after that, you decide who you want to test it, who do you want to give it to? And then you'd test it, watch, not explain to users, and you'd interact with it, take notes and analyze. And at the end, you'd reflect and iterate, okay, where do I want to go back to, and where should I work on it again, my design? Anybody have any questions on this? Oh. Owen?
No.
Okay. What could be useful for you as a coach? Well, the ideation phase is pretty interesting from my perspective. There's tons of different methods available that can help people get ideas out of their minds. And the ideation rounds that we do in design thinking are really good for different personalities. If you've got a group, you know this firsthand. Some people really feel comfortable talking and other people just sit there. We have ideation rounds where you write on a Post-it note. We have ideation rounds where you're physically active and ideating. We have rounds where you're sitting back and being contemplative, and ones that you shout out ideas. And they all work for different kinds of people. And so when I'm doing a design thinking workshop, I mix these up to ensure that everybody feels comfortable participating and that I actually get good ideas from everybody. It's really nice. This could be useful for you. Ideation also increases the number and the depth of ideas. If anyone was in the German chapter SFIO round, you'll see when we go through some ideation rounds that the depth and complexity of ideas gets deeper as you go through successive rounds of brainstorming. So the idea that you come up with first is usually the most obvious and maybe the least innovative. Then we also use creative constraints to help people get unstuck. Ideation rounds can be run so that you might say, oh, the idea has to be free, or the idea you come up with has to be using existing technology, or the idea has to be something your team would love. And so you can create all of these constraints and make people get comfortable with seeing this as like, oh, it's not something bad, actually. Being able to ideate within let's say I'm coming to you as a coaching session, the things that are, I see right now as restraining me could actually make me more creative. And ideation is really fun. I've heard from some people, some coaches, fellow coaches, not in the solution focused space, but they say, sometimes when I do a laid back round, people, they're not so happy. They want to do something. They want to get active and more like a team building event. Some aspects of design thinking are really fun for that. They get people excited and active. Prototyping. Prototyping is really good for different learners. I could imagine people coming up with their idea of a perfect future and building it with Legos, or drawing it on a canvas or painting it on a canvas. We're purposely testing an idea or a feature in a small step in a prototype. We're trying one aspect out and then trying it. Does it work or not? And that's something that can be not scary for people. If they realize, okay, I'm just today going to try one thing, and it's a prototype anyway, it's not the real thing, it becomes like, okay, I'll just try it out. And with a prototype, you can see immediate progress because you've actually built something that now you can test. And it's a way to feel a sense of accomplishment during a session. And again, it's really fun. And testing. I like to test because when you go into a testing scenario and you have predefined, okay, I'm going to focus on what's working. My goal right now is to test what works. And if I go in there with that mindset, then I am even heightened that I notice what's working and I analyze it, and then I decide to iterate or take the next step. So we're not going in to test something to see whether it's good or bad. It's about what works best, what wows, and what can I use to build on in a future prototype. All things that I think could be useful for SF. Show of hands, interesting maybe? Yeah. Now I wanted to see whether we wanted to try and ideate. So the first one that I wanted to try is a thing called brain writing. And brain writing is where you just write down your ideas and share them with the team. You can do it high tech. You could go to a Jamboard. I created one just in case somebody wanted to use it. Or you take the back of the paper that you used for the 30 circles and you write down your ideas. So you should write down your ideas for about 2 minutes and then share them with the people in your team and just talk about them. And after 5 minutes, we'll bring you back into the main session. So the first one is about getting your initial ideas. It's called brain writing in silence. You go into your room, somebody sets the timer for 2 minutes, and then jot down all of your ideas for your topic. Either you're picking an SFIO conference, how to get the vaccine out as fast as possible, or how to incorporate design thinking into our SF practice. Okay, so into the breakout room, 2 minutes alone, writing, 1 minute to say hello to everybody, 2 minutes to write down your thoughts, 2 minutes to share, and then we'll bring you back. So you're all back. Thank you. What did you notice? Were you able to get some ideas down on paper? Yeah? Okay. All right. Now, the next ideation round works when you already have ideas on paper and have shared them with each other. Because now you take it from a different perspective. And this is what we used in the German chapter. We agreed that we were going to ideate from the perspective of Pippi Langstrumpf. How would Pippi design a virtual conference? And we came up with a lot of crazy ideas about, we're going to structure the conference like a house, like a multicolored house. And people are going to be able to go from room to room. And we're going to create it how we want. And it's going to be filled with lots of bright colors. And maybe we're going to even sing in one of the rooms. One room was going to be upside down. And we were going to be able to flow through with no structure, just like Pippi did. And so it was interesting to say, okay, when we take the perspective of this movie character, who's kind of crazy, a book character, we were able to approach the ideation in a different way. It kind of opened doors and said, okay, it's okay to be crazy. And so for the next ideation round, we're going to see if we can get some new ideas that didn't come out in the first brain writing circle. And so the idea is you go back in your room and you agree quickly on who are we going to pick as our prospective person. The vaccine out. Maybe you pick Greta Thunberg and you say, okay, if I were Greta, how would I solve this vaccine problem? Well, I would ship everything on a boat. I would cool it with water instead of anything else. And so the idea is just to pick who you want, who you think is a real character or a personality who would force you to think in a different way, encourage you to think in a different way. Welcome back, everybody. So how was it? Were you able to come up with different ideas in somebody else's perspective? Yeah. I'm going to do a brainstorming session with costumes at my next in-person seminar. I think that would also be fun. So anybody want to share the creative ideas you came with, either for vaccine or SF in your own or the SF conference? Christiana?
I was with the SF conference, and we didn't agree to one person, like, for example, Pippi, because we collected what all of us would bring in. And it was from Steve Jobs towards Bruce Springsteen, towards Nelson Mandela, Pippi once again. And we made it, and this was wonderful, that we shared our ideas from the perspectives of and Grinch was also integrated. We shared our ideas from the perspectives of all these 5 people. And it was wonderful co-creation. I loved it.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure, in German. Any specific idea that you wanted to share?
One thing was that it should be something with one from Steve Jobs' perspective that is digitally new, what nobody has done before. Yeah, so with Bruce Springsteen, it should be something where you experiment and play together, giving space to one, to the others, and co-create. Mm-hmm. Maybe the others would share that, because there were more. So I would love if you help me. So Jasper or Gary and Marco.
Well, the Grinch was pretty much sure that we shouldn't mention this bloody name solution focus, and we should talk about what it really is. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in it. And I think Nelson Mandela pointed out that it's important that everybody feel included. So if it shouldn't be mentioned, we had to make sure that nobody was left out.
Inclusive. Excellent. Those are really good ideas that came out of there. Really something new.
You have to listen to Monica. She has a better idea.
I see Monica has adopted the perspective of the angel in the vaccine trial. So Monica, what will the angel say?
Yeah, it's Nikolausi Day, no? So I thought I could wear my halo today. We had a wonderful group, really. And if it's okay, if I share with everyone, Ons, Ivy, yeah, Yasin, all right. So we had the vaccine topic, and we were thinking about how could the vaccine be especially delivered quickly to the countries like Africa and all these countries that are not Europe and not having their own vaccine. So we were first, it was funny, we agreed quickly on what we want to develop. We want to develop a temperature sensitive container that you can quickly and easily deliver and transport. And the thing is that it has to be cooled down so much, like minus 70 degrees, which is the difficulty. So we first thought we could maybe separate the vaccine thing to something that needs to be cooled down really to the 70 minus degree, and something that does not. So we could have two different containers. One could be shipped and one could be flown. And then you came up with this person who would support our idea. And we agreed on Elon Musk. Yeah, so he's the space guy who does the Tesla stuff. And we got a lot of millionaires together to finance a missile where the radium is used to cool down the stuff. And he will be sending this missile around the world. And this missile is created so it can drop the vaccine over all countries that need it.
That is definitely a well thought out, crazy idea that has some truth to it, some really interesting parts. Now, how do we get it to Elon Musk, right? How do we get that idea to Elon Musk?
Yeah, we have to have another breakout.
I would like to see how you're going to make a prototype out of that one. Cool. Anybody else have anything they wanted to share? Okay, we're going to try one last round of brainstorming. And this is taking it even one further. So collaboration is really good. And we're going to try collaborating with someone in your team on an idea. So normally we say that, X plus Y equals a great idea, for example. If you put an ant and a robot together, what could happen? Is it a robot that can walk over things easily, or a robot that can carry 100 times its weight on its back? And so when you go into your brainstorming rooms this time, I would like you to do the following. Take someone else's idea in your group and add to it. Or take two ideas from people in your group and put it together to create something unexpected. Oftentimes, innovation happens when there's something and you put it together with something else, and together it's something totally new. And so this time, Monica, stop making me laugh with Rudolph. If you could go into your room and pick somebody else's idea, try that it's not your own, and the true SF, appreciate someone else's idea and put it together with something new. Is that clear? So 2 minutes to gather and then use your creative powers. We'll bring you back in 5 minutes. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, go to your rooms, please. Join your rooms.
And now I'm going to take you through how I use SF in my own design thinking. So the nice thing about design thinking is that you can consider that it's like an empty frame, right? Design thinking has a goal of each phase, and it's set up like a structure, but it doesn't tell you necessarily what to put in there. And there are books like these and thousands of pages on the internet where you can find a lot of different what's called methods. And they're so fun and they're so well described and there's such a variety of them. This process enables you to be creative, to put some 6 phases together that meet the needs of your client and fit your personality as a coach. And that is the wonderful part about it. And that's why I started thinking about SF and design thinking. So I am a really visual learner, and I saw this template and I started thinking, what do you think caught my eye? Certainly not the stuff on the top. Any ideas?
What wows?
Yeah. What is, what if, what wows, and what works? I had a cup of coffee and I was like, wow, this is really SF. So I took off all of those bubbles and I figured, how could I apply SF to this chart? And so I put the bubbles back in, changed the color, and thought, here's how I can overlay, like in the old days with that clear the clear piece of plastic folia, Monica, that you put over a page, a transparency sheet, and what could I do on top of it? So team building, adding SF into the process, team building, the check-in and the affirm, clear areas where SF brings value, getting a team together. Understanding the problem, we can think of that as building a platform together as a group of coaches. So we're 4 to 6 different people working together, diverse. How do we build a shared platform? And then I said, we don't have to necessarily talk about problems. We can talk about user needs. And already that's a more positive formulation. And in design thinking, we do a lot of interviews with users, and sometimes they're very problem focused. When does the problem happen? What's the problem? When did you experience the problem? And I thought this is a clear area where it would make sense to add SF in there. So we're a group of 4 to 6 people, again, this team, designing for other people. And it just made me think, that's awfully paternalistic. Yes, I'm going out to talk to my users, but I bet they have clues on what would work for them. And so the SF value, or the new thing in this approach, is we're looking for clues from the user on positive solutions. So when is the problem not so bad? Bringing a scale along to interviews, and maybe asking the miracle question at some point during the interview. So normally I would ask them, or I would have asked them, can you describe the problem? I want to take copious notes. And I still ask them about the problem. I don't throw that out the window, but now I make a concerted effort to say, okay, I bet you have some ideas on how we could solve this, and let me ask you about them. When I am in a workshop setting and I'm doing interviews in a space, I bring along my scale that I brought, and I have people move, either put a Post-it somewhere where they are on the scale or use a clip. And I actually built a mobile version of a scale that I could just easily put in my pocket, and it helps them actually having to move something on the scale. It gets them interested. We're usually talking to people that we meet on the street, right? We don't plan it in advance sometimes. And so by showing them something and saying, could you move this along the scale and tell me where you are and tell me what would take you to the next step? I then can listen, and the person who's working on the interview with me can write down what the person says. So it's a really fun way to get people interacting with the scale in a different way. So then in brainstorming, I have added another brainstorming exercise, the theoretical future perfect. And we brainstorm at some point during the hour or the 2 hours that we do brainstorming. What would the theoretical future perfect look like for all of us as a team? And what would it look like for our users? And I just put materials on the table and have them draw, create, build with Legos a perfect future. Prototyping, we still have to build the prototype, I like to tell them that this is a small step forward. So we're not building the end solution, the perfect future right away. We're building some small step that's going to allow us to test our direction. It's going to show it to people. And so in that way, we're taking a small step towards the future. In testing, I also have, what failed is one of the questions we tend to look at, and what worked. I changed some of the feedback grids so that the SF language is more present in the feedback grid. And so it focuses people's attention on what worked and what wowed instead of what worked and what didn't work. And sometimes during, instead of putting the feedback on a graph, I will run or add a sparkling moment exercise to the team. We definitely ask scaling questions. What did we learn? Where are we on the scale? What prototype would bring us to the next step in the in our journey? And what would that look like? And finally, team building, checkout. I use an affirm, and we do a resource gossip at the end of our sessions. And I followed that same process in a whole bunch of different areas. I thought, now, if I took a look at that graphic of how design thinking works, and I could add SF that way, why don't I look at individual of these methods and apply SF the same way? And so what I did is I said, okay, I added some questions in this interview grid. So instead of saying, what's your biggest challenge? What happened? Just descriptive stuff. I ask them to submit their own clues. So when is the problem not so bad? Think about the most recent time when the problem didn't happen. What happened instead? And how have you managed to get this far? And all of those let me get ideas directly from the user instead of saying, okay, I'm qualified to develop solutions for users who I just think I can develop them for. Everybody's different. At the end, we do a future perfect, a miracle question. What would it look like? And where are we on the scale? I also look, Larissa, I'm in the middle of a call. Excuse, my child is coming in. I took a look at this method called the 5 whys, and it helps us delve deeper into why a problem happens. Why does it happen? Why is it a problem? Why? And instead I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to have the 5 what else's? And so I created a template for that. And a cover story mockup. This is a template widely available on the Mira platform. And this is very SF in a way. Represent a future world where your idea has been made a reality and it makes a positive difference. And then I preload materials onto the Miro board so that it makes it easier for people in my design thinking seminars to make a quick mock-up of what it looks like. And I change this to a visual Paul Jackson future perfect documentary, really. In a retrospective, at the end, when we follow up, this is a very common format people use. What went well, what didn't go well, and action. So I changed it to what went well, what else, and what are small steps that would bring us forward. Or I've substituted a sparkling moments exercise. The final thing is that I'm going to show you is a design thinking testing feedback grid. This is a very standard template, likes, criticisms, questions, and ideas from the testing feedback. And I changed it into what works, what wows, any questions, and more ideas. And really, that's just the way I approach it. I'm really visual. And by looking at these templates, I put on my SF glasses and I say, like, why does it make sense? And by looking at it under a different lens, it helps me figure out where can I put SF in and where does it make sense. Yeah? Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Stephanie, can you share your screens afterwards by email or?
I have some slides
Okay.
and I can bring them up now.
Okay, thank you.
Could we put them in the chat? Or
I'm putting them right now.
great.
Okay, they're loading. Any
Hey.
other questions?
Stefan, the last slide, you said what else? You replaced what's not working, no? What did not go well? Would it be okay to ask, instead of what else, what could go better or what needs more development?
Yes. The reason why I did it like that is I figured in my groups, well, the whole purpose is to leave out the stuff that doesn't work and further improve things that work. And so if we have this list of what works, we're just not focusing on the stuff that didn't work. And people know, okay, we're not going to bring that into the next version. We make a full list of what worked and then take that into our next prototype.
So you don't even want them to think about stuff that could be even more invented.
We could talk about changes to what we did that would make it even more effective. We could change it to what would make this even more effective.
Okay.
So one question, Stephanie, what did you observe by changing these words and what works and what else and so on? How were the people from the more problem-focused environment able to switch? Because I recognized in our breakout room, it was a wonderful atmosphere of sharing, rethinking, co-creation. But I think this needs the openness to be curious on the other person and to adapt and not to stay with their own thinking. What is your experience?
My experience is that by starting with SF questions, especially in interviews, people are much more likely to share. I've had some interviews with for a financial services company with people all around the world. And we see that in some cultures, people are more willing to give interviews a little bit. And in other countries, people are more like, why are you talking to me? What do you want? And by focusing on positive things that works in a relationship or that works in the current solution, it lets them relax. And they're much willing to share insights, which is really nice. Team stuff. Definitely for the team in the wrap-up sessions. Sometimes there's a lot of conflict that goes on with teams that first are getting together, don't know each other. And in corporate situations, it's about producing outcomes that are innovative. And I have noticed that people are much more celebratory about the progress that has been made to date instead of focusing on like, oh my God, how are we going to get through this project?
Stephanie, do you suggest your books or some article or something that you can you
Yes.
write that in the?
Yep. It's a terrific visual book about many methods that are used in design thinking. And so that would be a great place for you to get insight. You can also Google any design thinking methods, and interaction or design interaction organization is also a place. This stuff is all free, and much of it is visual, which would help you, if you're like me, come up with ideas on where SF could fit in there. Thank you very much. I always get so much out of talking with you and from considering how SF can be brought into my other world, and speaking to you is like coming home.